You're listening to Grown and Growing with Sonia Hamlin. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Grown and Growing podcast. I'm a little under the weather, but the show must go on. There's a new episode dropping and the show must go on. So if you listened to last week's episode, which was episode 60, that episode was all about how to truly recover from a divorce or a breakup. Thank you to everybody who reached out to me to let me know how much that episode resonated with them. I really appreciate it. And that is exactly why I do this podcast, for responses like that. This week, we're on the opposite side of the spectrum. This week, we're talking about how to restore a marriage that is suffering from a loss of connection or from a lack of trust. My guest this week is life and relationship coach Jeanell Greene. Jeanell uses her 15 years of coaching experience, as well as her own life's journeys with the relationships, to help couples restore and improve their relationships. Jeanell is very passionate about what she does, right? She loves it. And she truly believes that anyone who wants to make their relationship work can make it work if they have the right tools. Jeanell is very open and candid about her own experiences with relationships, from abuse to divorce to having a lack of trust or suffering from a lack of trust in her own relationships. And she uses all of that information plus her expertise to help couples bring their marriage back to where it was or to new levels that they had never reached before. I can't say that, I agree with everything that she said, but Jeanell is so compassionate about her approach that I definitely walked away with some tangible tools about how I can improve even my own marriage. And I'll also say that I think that, this episode will really resonate with couples who both want to make their relationship work. I am of the opinion that a person cannot make a relationship work on their own. That's a lot of heavy lifting for one person to do. It's a lot of work, and two people must be engaged and committed to making their relationship work in order to do so. So without further ado, let's get into this topic. Welcome, Jeanell, to the podcast. How are you?
I'm great, Sonia. How are you today?
I am good. I am excited about this conversation. I feel like I am in a relationship mode right now on the podcast. I just recently had a conversation about how to recover from a divorce or a breakup. And so I feel like I'm on the other side of the spectrum with you, where we can talk about how to save and how to preserve a relationship. So I'm happy you're here to give us some balance.
Yes, I love juicy conversations, especially when it comes to love. I think that, in a world where we kind of focus on negative a little bit too much, I think, and
Yeah.
it can get really we go into dark places. It's like, what's that saying? Misery loves company.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I remember when I first started coaching, I was very hesitant to talk about my own marriage
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, nobody wants to hear about a great marriage. They just want to hear about crappy marriages. That's like, that's what the news is like. But I realized that, what I'm really committed to is changing the conversation and
Yeah.
making it okay to celebrate. And we should celebrate love.
We should. I mean, the world needs more love. But it's interesting that you say that, because when I'm like, let me look up some statistics on marriage, right? I'm
Mm.
talking about marriage a couple of times, and I want to really know where we are as a country with
Mhm.
marriage. And the statistics, Jeanell, they don't look good. They don't look
No.
good for marriage. So I want to ask you, do you think there is a future for marriage as we know it? And if you do, what keeps you positive about it? Why do you feel so positively about where we're going with marriage?
Yeah, well, first, to address your first question, I think that there is hope. However, I think the issue is that we've become so resigned,
Mhm.
so fearful, so cynical about love because of the statistics,
Yes.
because of our parents, of watching them struggle, watching our friends struggle, hearing people saying that, marriage is out of date or is unrealistic or, is just a fantasy that actually isn't real. And having the kind of marriage that I have to disagree.
Mhm.
And I think that what's required is for us to first of all heal, take responsibility for our own wounds, for our ego, to get reconnected to who we are, where we came from. I have clients that are spiritual and have faith based, but I also have clients that are agnostic and atheists, and regardless of it is that they believe, I can still speak their language.
Mhm.
I just replaced the word God with love or universe. But I think at the end of the day, what we all want is to be loved and accepted. But when we don't love and accept ourselves, and this is the thing, I think this is the thing, is that so many of us think that we can have a great relationship with someone else without having a great relationship with ourselves first.
Woo, that's a that's a big one. That is a
Yeah,
big one. It
I
is. It
actually
always
had
comes.
someone I
Okay.
actually had someone get mad at me, like angry for me insinuating that he's like, what does self-love have to do with being in a relationship? And I said to him, well, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to be with someone who doesn't love themselves, because when we don't love ourselves, we're not even open to being loved, even though we say we are. So, I see this with my husband, especially in the beginning, where my husband would shower me with compliments and love and affection in every respect. And there were times when I would deflect or I would call BS, or I would think to myself, okay, what's the ulterior motive here? Is he trying to get into my pants?
Hmm.
There's all of these excuses I would come up with rather than just accepting, like, wow, this person actually thinks I'm pretty great.
Yeah.
But because I didn't feel that about myself, I would not receive that
Hmm.
with grace.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, we talk a lot about self-love. What does that look like to you? Can you
Mhm.
tell if you are a person who really loves themselves?
Yeah, I would say 10 years ago, if you asked me, hey, Jeanell, do you love yourself? I'd be like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That sounds like something that's obvious. But, in doing this work and also doing the work on myself and then doing the work with clients, what I really see is, first of all, so few of us have been taught how to have compassion for ourselves, to be our own best friend. The way that we talk to our best friend saying, hey, it's okay. Don't be so hard on yourself. You're doing the best you can. I don't know about you, but I grew up in a very, being a first generation Canadian, there was a lot of expectation. And I was the firstborn too.
Hmm.
So I was expected to get good grades, to, be a good girl, to people please, to be obedient, all those things, to be basically the perfect child. And there was very little space, at least in my opinion, to be just normal and to make mistakes and to
Hmm.
fail. And
Right.
so I think so many of us are so afraid to fail, when failing is just a part of life, but we bring shame and guilt and
Hmm.
all of this low vibe energy, when it's like, hey, we're just human. So I think,
Correct.
self-love also requires something called forgiveness. And so few of us know what it actually is and what it means and what it looks like. And so we hold guilt and shame against ourselves, against other people, which of course brings us farther apart rather than creates connection. But it's all normal. It's all survival
Yeah.
mechanisms. It's all ways that we just try to protect ourselves.
Yep.
And what I see the issue is that we are more concerned about protecting ourselves than actually experiencing what life and love is really all about.
Yeah. It takes a level of vulnerability to go there. And I think because we live in such a harsh world, I think you're right. I think we are hard on ourselves before other people can be hard on us. We are hard
Yeah.
on ourselves to protect ourselves from, any hurt, hurt or danger that's coming our way. But it really, while it blocks out, perceivably blocks out some of that outside world, it also blocks you from love. It blocks you from yourself. So I definitely
Yeah.
agree with that. So,
And one of the trends that I've been noticing is how we reject ourselves before anybody else can reject us.
mhm,
And I
yeah,
think that is so dangerous, but we don't even realize we're doing it. It's just
right.
such an automatic pattern behavior that was started when we were kids. So, I think one of the powerful aspects of coaching is actually noticing and recognizing that that's what's happening. Because I think when we can see that for what it is without judgment,
Mhm.
then we can actually start to cause change and choose a different way of
Yeah,
being.
absolutely. So you have been coaching, I believe, for over 15 years, right? You've been a certified life and relationship coach for a very long time, saving a lot of couples, a lot of
Yes,
relationships, which is awesome.
yes,
I want to
yes.
start by saying, how did you get into this work? Because first of all, 15 years, over 15 years of experience when you look amazing. I'm like,
Thank you.
how is
Thank
it you're
you.
over 15 years? But what drew you to this work? I know that you didn't always start out on this path of helping
Yeah.
couples. So how did you get here?
Well, I've been actually coaching for 15 years, but it started in corporate.
Hmm.
And I worked in sales. I worked in sales for about 20 years. And it was an incredible run. I won free trips. I won something called a top producer president's club. So my first year, I got a free trip to Bermuda. I got to bring my husband. I got to go jet skiing in the Bermuda Triangle.
Hmm.
Like, it was amazing. And then the year after that, I qualified again and I got to go to Rome. I got to go to the Sistine Chapel and the Vatican and just do amazing things. And yet, coming home, I realized like that was great, but it didn't give me the sense of satisfaction and fulfillment that I thought I was going to experience. And so, 5 days after I got home from Rome, I quit my job. And
Wow.
I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew this wasn't it. And I
Hmm.
think turning 40 was part of it. I remember sitting on the couch and thinking to myself, that first half of my life was a wild ride. Like, it was amazing. I met the Queen of England. I got to sing for Maya Angelou and got a picture with her.
Nice.
I met Will Smith. Like, I've just had this incredible life, and my family is fantastic. But, turning 40, I realized that, I'm at the halfway point of my life, right?
Hmm.
And sort of imagining what the end of my life would look like and what would I regret and what would still would feel like I hadn't accomplished yet. And what I saw was, there I was standing at the pearly gates of heaven, and there's St. Peter, and he says to me, Jeanell, what did you do with your life? And there wasn't really anything outstanding
Right.
that I could really point to that was bigger than my own ego.
Hmm.
And that's really when I said, okay, I want to do something different. Like, sales is great and it, paid me really well. And I wanted my second life to be something bigger than myself. And so I quit my job. I decided to really to do my own business, started coaching, and really what I'm passionate about is marriage. And my husband is a huge part of that. But also, I've gone through divorce and I was able to come out on the other side in with power, with responsibility, and with peace with my ex. And our divorce only costed us $80.
Wow.
But the other piece of it was my parents. So
Hmm.
when I was 9, my dad, first of all, my parents had a fantastic marriage, like just perfect. As a child, and you look at them, you're like, wow, they've got the most amazing marriage. And that's what I
Hmm.
want. But then when I was 9, my dad actually had an affair with my mom's best friend who lived in our
Whoa.
basement
Whoa.
and got her pregnant.
Whoa. I did
I
not
was
expect
9.
that.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
9. My sister was 6 and my brother was only 3.
Oh my
And so
God.
my mom caught them and she, asked him to leave. But that whole time that he was gone, she prayed for him. She
Hmm.
prayed that he would find his way back. And 3 years later, here he comes back asking for forgiveness.
Hmm.
Um, he was diagnosed with renal failure, so he couldn't work. He had to wait for a kidney transplant.
Hmm.
And I think that was the awakening that he needed to really come to terms with the quality of his life and what he's
Right.
done. And so he was a better father, a better husband. And for the next 13 years before he passed away, we had the most extraordinary family. And my mom truly, truly forgave him. She never brought it up, she never hung it over his head. It was like truly put in the past. And that was something that I think is so extraordinary and something that I talk a lot about with my clients, saying, if you truly love this family, if you truly want to have to be the role models for your children so that they can have the kind of relationships that they deserve, it starts with you being really great teachers and role models. And so
Hmm.
that's kind of where I started that conversation. But fast forward, when my dad passed away, I thought that because my dad had come back, my parents had made up,
Hmm.
that all was rosy and there was no trauma.
Right.
But as I started going through different relationships and I noticed there was this pattern of mine where I was attracting very abusive and toxic men who cheated and lied.
Hmm.
And I just, stopped and thought to myself, like, what is it about me that this
Hmm.
keeps happening? Because I know I'm a good person. So
Right.
why is this? And so in doing the work, what I saw, and this is my first experience with coaching. So that's why I'm a big fan of coaching. I hired
Hmm.
someone to help to coach me through this. But what she helped me see was that there were 3 decisions that were made by that little 9-year-old watching her dad leave that day. And those
Hmm.
3 decisions is, I'm unlovable. Because if I'm a daddy's girl and my dad still leaves, that must mean that I'm
Hmm.
unlovable. Number 2, I can't trust people because number 3, they will leave me eventually. So I saw how or why I chose the kind of men that I chose because subconsciously I was like, well, they're going to leave me anyway. So why would I go and get a great guy?
Hmm. Let me ask you a question though. So you
Yeah.
saw your mom take your dad back, right? They were able to reconnect and, have
Yeah.
a really great marriage. What did you learn from her? Like, did you think when you were in these abusive relationships that you should tolerate it or you should be forgiving because your mom was? Or why did you ever stay longer than you should have because of the example that your mom told? How did you
Yeah.
rationalize and think about her role in staying? Because she sounds like a saint, and that's a
Yes.
big ask, right? To forgive
Yes.
somebody with that much of betrayal. So how did
Yes.
you see her role in it, and how did that impact you?
Well, first of all, yeah, I always saw her as a Mother Teresa, as someone who like I aspired to be. But as I get older, I also see how, my mom was always very strong,
Hmm.
never cried, never complained, and always said yes to everything that anybody needed from her.
Hmm.
But I also see that that's a double-edged sword because that has prevented me from really allowing myself to feel all the feelings
Yeah, yeah,
and to
yeah,
be okay with crying and to be okay with, hey, you know what, I don't actually have to be strong all the time. Like I can actually give
yeah.
myself some space to have my little pity party, and then I'm gonna wipe my tears and get back up and continue on.
It's a hard
um
standard to live up to. Like if
a
you're
hundred
when yeah,
percent
when you view your mom in that way, to me as a daughter, that would be a very hard thing to try to live up to.
Yeah, and
So,
especially when your mom's are here and you don't want to disappoint her.
hmm.
And then, I'm Catholic as well. So
Hmm. Lots of
going,
guilt,
oh
like
my
built into
gosh,
that. Well,
a hundred
from what
percent.
I
And then
hear.
it was like, okay, Lord, like, am I with this man for real, for real? Or did I make a mistake and I need to remove myself from this? So yes,
Hmm.
to answer your question, I stayed for 3 years and probably 2 years and 9 months too long. Like I
Right.
knew pretty much the week after we came home from our honeymoon, like he completely changed. It was almost like he had put on this act to, I like to call, hook me in, bait me in.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as we came home from our honeymoon, it was like this mask came off.
Wow.
He stopped going to church. He stopped helping me around the house. He stopped showering. It was
Wow.
just, and it became this, like, it felt like a very parent child kind of relationship. And if I
Mm-hmm.
said go right, he'll go left. If I said stop, he'd go. Like, he would, it was almost like he would rebel
Right.
against everything that I wanted. And I kind of sensed that from his relationship with his mom,
Mm-hmm.
and how he did not like his mother very much. And
Right.
so when our relationship started to change, it was I could see that correlation. But in that moment, and here's one of the things I learned from that experience, is that so many of us, we get married for the wrong reasons. We
Mm-hmm.
get married more, and this is for me, I got married because I was so afraid of being alone,
Right.
so afraid that I was just like, the first person who who proposes to me, I'm going to just say it. And and being
Right.
Filipino, it's like when you're six, as soon as you turn 16, it's like, okay, when you're going to get married, when you're going to have kids, you better
Right.
hurry up. Don't get fat, or else nobody else will love you. Don't get
Mm-hmm.
dark. You need to have lights. Like, there's all these things that you had
Right.
to be. And here I am, looking at my watch, going, oh my God, I'm 24 and I'm still single. I need
Right.
to hurry up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that a lot of us, we rush into these situations when no, it's not perfect. And we're just thinking that, oh, we'll just change him.
Right.
We'll just fix
Correct.
him.
Yeah. And
Right.
I
We see
think,
the potential.
yeah, exactly. We talked a lot about that in the conversation I had about divorce. You see the potential in someone. And there's so many reasons that people get married and they're not the right ones. And I
Yeah.
also think that what you said about knowing, right? There is so many people who are divorced. When they say, when did they know that they had to leave? It was like, I knew I shouldn't have even married him. Like they can trace it all the way back to before they
Yeah.
actually said, I do. So, and that's
Yeah.
always interesting to me. So,
Yeah. I even remember calling my mom, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 months before the wedding, in tears, because my ex was quite violent,
mhm.
and he was 6'7".
Oh my, what?
I am 4'10" and a half.
Oh my God.
And he was German French with a
Hmm.
very big voice and had a very bad temper. And we had talked about having kids. And I remember this one time where we got a puppy, and it's a poodle, like a little tiny
Hmm.
5 pound little ball of fur. And I think she peed on the floor and he beat her.
The
And I
puppy.
remember, yeah, the puppy. And I remember grabbing his arm and just like holding it and being like, stop, that is enough. And he would not stop. And that
Hmm.
was the moment I was like, I am not having children with this man.
Yeah, yeah. That's a telltale sign. Animal violence, that's like up there on
Yeah.
the the psychopathic charts.
Yeah.
So I want to get into your work. So obviously you've had a very dynamic and interesting path that led you here. I want to
Yeah.
talk about people who are married and their marriage may not be where they want it to be when they look back, right? When they take inventory of where they are today. I want to talk about the death of a marriage. I saw you talking about that in another interview, and I thought it was very interesting
Mm.
because I want to talk about how a marriage slowly dies and why people don't see it often or why they ignore the patterns, why it's so easy to slip into um, a pattern where your marriage is not in a good place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Whew. That's a loaded one. I think, what we were talking about before is, first of all, going into marriage without asking the hard questions,
Mhm.
especially when we're in that engaged phase where everything is just like fairy tale
Yes.
amazing, right? The sex is
Right.
great. Anyway,
Butterflies. Yes.
butterflies. Yeah. And, and I see that for myself as, there were things that we should have talked about, and I knew we should have talked about, but it was such an awkward conversation
Mhm.
that we just kind of sweep it under the rug and we're like, oh, it'll work out, it's okay. But it's so important. And so a lot of
Mhm.
the couples I work with, the things that they're dealing with are things that should have been dealt with right from the get-go. Like, one person has a very high sex drive, someone else doesn't.
Right.
One person's a major saver, The other one's a major spender. Like one wants to live on the West Coast, the other one wants to live on the East Coast. One wants kids, one doesn't. I'm like, did you guys not discuss this before?
Right.
But a lot of the couples I deal with, they get pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
So that automatically leads to starting and getting married and having a family.
Right.
But they skip the important part called friendship,
Mm-hmm.
because to build trust, you need to have that foundation of friendship. And I think that's one of the things that me and my husband were able to do, was we built this amazing friendship for about 3 years until we actually decided to be a couple. And so
Mm-hmm.
when we coupled, that trust was so strong that we were able to build very quickly and very strongly from the
Mm-hmm.
get-go. But I think very few couples know how to do that, and B, even if they did know how to do it, they're not willing to do the work. They're not willing to be uncomfortable. They're not willing to challenge the other person. And I
Right.
think that's really, really important. I
So
think
if
for
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, the other thing is, I think for men have not been taught to, traditionally, right, to feel their feelings, and that
Mm-hmm.
emotions are okay. So when they're dealing with a woman who's feeling emotions, they either shut down or try to shut her down,
Right.
which we all know never works.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
it's not like he doesn't, and I think this is the part that gets people get confused about. It's not that he doesn't care. It's not that he's, unfeeling, or anything like that he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
love her. He just has no idea how to deal with that level of emotion, what to say, what to do. Like, he's hijacked as well. He's
Yeah.
emotionally hijacked,
Yeah.
right? And he's feeling like, oh, this must be my fault, why she's feeling this way.
Mm-hmm.
And then for her, I think there's a lot of expectation that he needs to say the right thing, do the right thing, and that she doesn't have to communicate it. He should just
Yes.
know, because if
Yes.
he loved her, he would know. There's all these things that we just assume because we've been watching a little bit too much TV and maybe some Disney,
Right.
that we're not dealing with like reality and remembering we're dealing with another human being who's got their own stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And one of the things that I always keep in mind when I'm with my husband is I always imagine him as a little 5-year-old boy
Mm-hmm.
who just wants to be loved and wants to be accepted and wants to be heard. And when I can come with him at that with that level of care and gentleness and thoughtfulness, rather than just spewing out whatever annoying comment I'm going to say,
Mm-hmm.
it really helps to prevent unnecessary hurt feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been married for 17 years, and I think that to me is the biggest lesson. I mean, I think you are taught that it's more romantic when a man can read your mind. It's more romantic when he just knows what to say and do. But I've also learned that men and women are just very different communicators.
Yeah.
And everybody doesn't, at least in my relationship, we're very different. I'm very cerebral and like over analytic, and I want to talk, and he's very simple, right?
Yes.
He's very simple. And there was when I had to let go of that level of expectation that I had
Mm.
for him, in terms of expecting him to read my mind, expecting him to know, expecting him to be somebody he wasn't. And
Yeah.
it's not a negative thing, right? Because I know how that could sound like it's really negative, but what you're actually doing is opening it up for more communication, and being open, and being accepting him for who he is, not settling for less, because that's different, but accepting him for who he is. And I think it kind of changed our relationship in a good way, that
Yeah.
that I was able to know this about him. And it didn't change overnight. It took a lot of work, which
Yeah.
which I imagine, when you're working with couples, you experience that. But when couples have that, are opposites, right? They have that song, Opposites Attract. When they have that level of when they are opposites and they haven't had those important conversations up front, and maybe they've ignored them for a while, right? You can ignore them, you can push them down, you can numb yourself to them. Can you get over that and stay married? Do you work with couples to overcome those differences so that they can, have a
Yeah.
happy marriage?
Yeah. Well, most of the time, honestly, they want the same thing. They just haven't closed their mouth long enough to
Hmm.
hear the other person. It's I imagine it's like two people yelling at each other and saying, "You need to listen to me," but nobody's listening.
Correct.
And so when I come in and I have a direct conversation with one of them and the other one's forced to shut their mouth and actually
Hmm.
listen, they actually learn something. And what they
Right.
learn is that they actually want the same thing. They just haven't been able to communicate that in a way that the other person can get it and it can land for them.
Hmm.
Right. Because
Right.
at the end of the day, when I say, okay, and my question always is, what do you want? What do you want? And they usually just say, we just want to be happy.
Yeah.
We just want to have peace. We just want to find love and connection again. I just want to feel important. Yeah, that's what your partner wants too.
Hmm.
But you got to be the change you wish to see. You can't expect the other person to make the first move and then you're going to make the change. No, you both need to make the effort. You both need to take a step towards each other and
Correct.
be responsible for your part. I think, many of us were taught that don't look at me, go look over there. And so we're always looking, we're unable to be accountable. And I think
Yeah.
this was the main issue with my ex-husband is he just absolutely refused to take any responsibility for anything. And
Right.
that really doesn't work. And
Hmm.
so I only work with couples who I can hear because I have a very distinct type of, listening now, right?
Hmm.
I can hear when someone does take responsibility and when they absolutely refuse
Right.
to admit that they also need to change, that they also have made mistakes, and that there's something for them to learn and to heal. But
Yeah.
if they're just pointing the finger the whole time, I am quick to say, listen, I am not the right person for you. Because
Hmm.
coaching is really about moving you forward to become the next better version of yourself. But
Right.
if you don't even know who you are right now, you don't know why you are the way you are, and you're not unwilling to accept that, how
Hmm.
can you change?
Do you find that couples come to you with the same level of expectation for what kind of marriage they want? So I know people say, I want to be happy in my marriage, or maybe they want to go back to how it used to be. How do you get them on the same page about wanting the same thing in a marriage? Like, do you feel like they have to agree on the type of marriage that they want to have, or is that something you kind of work through in session?
Yeah, we work through it in session, but at the end of
Mhm.
the day, typically the man just wants to make the woman happy. Like, I
Yeah.
feel for guys. They're like, I don't want much. I just want her to not yell at me. I just want her to be appreciative of me. I just want to make her happy. Like, seriously, he's like, just tell me what I need to do, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
typically she's the one that's like, I want you to do this, I want you to do this, I want you to do this, which is fine. The problem is that she's communicating it in a critical way or in a negative way or a demanding slash nagging way.
Right.
So what I'll do is I'll teach them how to communicate in a distinct way. Because again, if we know that all men want to do is make us happy, what they want is appreciation. So I'm going to tell a quick story. My husband used to be 300 pounds.
Hmm.
And I would go to the gym and I'd be like, hey, babe, you should come to the gym, and work out with me. But he had such low self-esteem. And since he was 5, he's been like an overweight kid,
Hmm.
never had a girlfriend, experienced a lot of bullying and a lot of teasing and a lot of rejection in his life.
Hmm.
So I know this about him, right? Anyways, so he finally comes to the gym with me and we get home and I see his arm and I notice it's a little bit like toned and I pointed
Hmm.
it out to him. I said, hey, baby, I just noticed your arm looks really great. And I went and I
Hmm.
squeezed it. And he's like, oh, really? I'm like, yeah, it's actually quite sexy. He's like,
Hmm.
oh, he's like, you know what? I think I'll go to the gym tomorrow. My
Hmm.
husband has lost 100 pounds and
Wow.
he is ripped, like
Hmm.
gorgeous.
Hmm.
And he's gonna kill me if he finds out I tell you this. But every day he sends me a photo of himself at the gym, flexing.
Nice, nice. Because it didn't happen
And
unless you get a photo of it, of course.
right, right. But here's the interesting thing: if I don't comment, he will mention it to me. He's like, hey, I sent you a picture and you didn't say anything. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, sorry. I didn't realize. I thought you were just,
Mm-hmm.
but really what I got in that moment was he just wants to be acknowledged, to
Mm-hmm.
be like, hey, babe, you look great. Because I know, yeah, he does it for himself. Yeah, he does it for his health, but he also does it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
all he wants is like a 2-second thumbs up or a high five or a good job or you look
Right.
amazing. That's all he wants. And that's all he needs to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we become so, um, what is that? So the best word I'm going to say, and this is probably so mean or like not inappropriate, but the word I'm going to use is chintzy.
Okay.
We are so chintzy on giving people appreciation, especially our
Mm-hmm.
partner. We'll do it to our kids, we'll do it to our coworkers. But when our partner says, hi, can you acknowledge me, please? We're like, what? Why am I acknowledging you? You didn't do anything special. But
Right.
yet that's what we want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's some awareness on your part to even pick up on that, to say, oh, he there's something else behind it. It's a 2 second, like or love or whatever it is that you do, but to him that it means something special. And I think, you know, that's another thing about marriage. When you've been married for a long time, it is not always the big gestures that get you, right? It's not
No.
like they're nice and you want them, but it's the little things that you start to really appreciate about your partner, the things that they notice about you, the small things. So, I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's pretty awesome that, that you can be aware enough to know that that would make him feel good, right?
Yeah, I think it's really important. This is, kind of leads to the conversation around love languages. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I know that verbal affirmations is one of his top love languages. So he just needs to be affirmed to say, hey, you know what? You're doing great. And, I think just being someone who grew up with so much negativity and insecurity, that's really what he needs to feel secure. And because of that, he speaks my love language
Mm-hmm.
like a master. Like, so my love language is service. This man cooks, he cleans, he offers me tea at night.
Mm-hmm.
He like goes grocery shop. And if I go grocery shopping by myself for whatever reason, as soon as he hears that garage door open, he is downstairs ready to grab the
Nice.
bags. And he did that today. And I only picked up 3. I bought a carrot, I bought a red pepper, and I bought a thing of creamer.
Mm-hmm.
And I can hear him coming down the stairs. And I said, he comes down. I said, what are you doing here? I'm like, I don't have anything to give you. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I just want to make sure you're okay and that you don't
That's
need
nice.
anything. And then he's like, hey, give me the carrot and the creamer and I'll help you bring it upstairs. And we have this running joke because he goes, you're too pretty to carry stuff upstairs. And I'm like, oh, you're right. Right. And I roll my eyes up. But again, like when we can give love in the ways that matter to them, our partner is way more willing to give love in the ways that
Yeah.
matter to us. But
Mm-hmm.
if we're so all consumed with what we want, give me, give me, give me,
Correct. Your love
and you're
language,
not
and you're
right.
giving your love language to a person who doesn't want that type of language, right? Who doesn't speak that kind of language or doesn't
Yeah.
respond to it. So
Yeah.
I know that your program is, um, I don't want to say aggressive, but you mentioned like
Intense.
it's intense.
Intense.
It's an intense
Yes.
program that you
Yes.
take people through.
Yes.
Is it how do you be how do you stop people from regressing, right? You come in, they work with you. What do you work on with them to stop people from going back to bad behaviors or behaviors that didn't serve their marriage well?
Yeah. I think first of all is getting them really clear about the impact
Hmm.
because we will not change. Like if we think about health, right? We will not change our habits around health until there's some sort of scare. Right?
Hmm.
Until someone
Right.
says, if you don't stop smoking, you're going to get lung cancer. Then we'll stop smoking. And even then, that sometimes people still
Right. They
don't stop.
don't. They
Right.
won't. Yeah.
But that first initial session is really getting them clear and straight and responsible about the impact of like, what if you keep going the way you're going? What's probably going to happen? And they'll admit to me, what's probably going to happen is we're going to get divorced.
Hmm.
Okay. And then what? And then our kids are going to, and then this, and then this. It's like, okay, but what if you did change? What if we did create something new? What does that look like? So I get them really invested in the new possibility that they want to create together, and get them seeing that they are actually a lot more alike than they think they are. They
Mm-hmm.
just don't have the tools. And I think the third thing is letting them know it's not their fault. It's not their fault that they're struggling, because usually the first one of the first questions I ask them is, tell me about your childhood. Tell me
Mm-hmm.
about your parents.
Mm-hmm.
And most of my clients come from divorced parents
Mm-hmm.
or abusive parents
Right.
or parents that have been murdered, like some pretty
Oh, wow. I wasn't going to say
painful.
murdered. I was going to say parents who should be divorced and they're not.
Oh
Because I
no.
think, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but you've seen the gamut.
Yeah, I have dealt with someone who's been raped by her father. Like there's a lot of stuff. So I, I work, the reason I call it intense is I work with them privately as well as a couple.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are a lot of things that our partner doesn't need to know about, right? Our own
Mm-hmm.
demons, our own wounds. And so I help them in that respect to see why they are the way they are. And a lot of times it's our parents,
Mm-hmm.
and then really bringing in compassion and forgiveness at that level. And then as a couple, we start to create frameworks, structures. We talk about expectations and agreements. And
Mm-hmm.
then because I'm their coach, I'm holding them accountable to these
Right.
things they say they want to create.
Mm-hmm.
We put intention and attention and focus into new things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm actually able to move them very quickly through the program that way.
Yeah, that's amazing to me. That's why I'm like, well, what is are they regressing? But I think because you go so deep, maybe that's not as much of an issue when you are able to dive deep into someone's, behavior,
Yeah.
thoughts, and things like that.
And you know what, they do regress, like especially
Hmm.
when we're dealing with infidelity, right? those
Uh-huh.
those
Yeah.
feelings of anger and sadness and distrust keep coming back. But
Hmm.
what I keep pointing to most of the time is, bring me back to when that happened. Tell me about your childhood, because it's all just
Yeah.
emotional experiences, right? So for me, trust is something that I struggle with daily, but I know it has very little to do with my actual reality
Hmm.
and more to do with fears from my childhood, memories from my childhood.
Hmm.
And when we have someone that we can share that with, that can listen to it without adding too much significance, but also bringing compassion and grace and healing and forgiveness to that little one, that little 5-year old
Yeah.
in of us that was hurt, then we can actually create something new. And so it's not like they don't regress. It's just that I just try to keep them, it, it, I keep them in their lane.
Hmm. Right.
Right, when they start to stray, and that's
Right.
okay. So it's a muscle, right? It's a mental
Right.
muscle that they get, and I give them affirmations, I give them homework to
Hmm.
do on their own, I also give them homework to do together.
Right.
And when they can see their first win, and usually that's week 2, week 3, when
Hmm.
they can see their first win, when they're like, oh my gosh, we did not fight all week, it's like,
Hmm.
hallelujah. Now they're excited to keep going, and they
Yeah.
trust me more, and they're willing
Hmm.
to do the hard things that before maybe they thought this isn't going to work. Now they're like, okay,
Hmm.
I'm willing to try this.
Yeah. So you brought up infidelity, and it's one of my questions. Like, is your approach different when they're struggling because of a lack of connection, right? Maybe they've been together for a long time, and when you have there is, if you're not careful, you fall into this pattern of becoming more roommates. There's a lack of
Yeah.
intimacy. Is your approach different with couples who struggle from a lack of connection than those who struggle from infidelity? Because you know,
Mm-hmm.
one is caused over time, right? Lots of time has eroded some of that. But infidelity, to me, it's like like sometimes it can be a surprise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that person, yes, your inner child is hurt, but also that person hurts you as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
he or she betrayed your trust. And so how does that work in a relationship? They say time
Mm-hmm.
heals all wounds, but
Mm-hmm.
I think you would
Mm-hmm.
probably disagree with that. But how do you approach those two different scenarios?
Yeah, you know what? I don't actually see them as different because
Mhm.
infidelity is actually a symptom. The root
Okay.
cause is the lack of connection. So that's why people struggle with getting over infidelity, because they see that as the root cause when it's actually something so much deeper. And I've done a lot of work around infidelity, both with my parents, both in my own relationships as well, not with my
Hmm.
husband, thank God.
Right.
But what I really see is that 90% of the time, the infidelity occurs because of a lack of connection, a lack of appreciation, a lack of
Hmm.
respect, a lack of quality time. It's not, it typically isn't like everything's amazing and then all of a sudden it just happens. There's
Right.
usually things. And it's funny because in the beginning, at first, the men, typically it's men,
Hmm.
is like, I don't know why that happened. But as we
Right.
start going through, they're like, I know why that happened.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, they're like, I felt lonely. I
Hmm.
felt like she gave all her attention to the kids and there was like nothing for me. And then
Hmm.
I would have to beg for sex. And then when we would have sex, it's like she wasn't even into it. And
Right.
so, here's this person who's giving me attention that I'm not getting at home.
Hmm.
And I did it simply because I could, because the
Right.
opportunity was there,
Hmm.
And so I think, again, though, oftentimes there's something going on in the childhood that needs to be healed.
Hmm. Wow. I mean, and that's a very, it's interesting because you come from such a loving, positive place. And when I think about all of the external factors that people deal with, right? Because you are dealing with this in your relationship, and whether you share it or not is up to you. But when you think about what other people would say, which I think is a thing, right? It's like the
Yeah.
conversation is, I would leave him. I would do this. You
Yeah.
need to leave him. There's a lot of noise in the world about what should happen when infidelity happens. And it's
Yeah.
rarely compassionate. It's rarely show
Yeah.
compassion, look
Yeah.
deeper, right? That's not the language that you
Yeah.
hear all the
And
time.
listen, some people, that's their thing. And they're like, that this is the
Hmm.
line that you don't cross. And if you cross it, that's it. We're done.
Right, right.
That's totally up to you. But the people that I work with are saying,
We want
I may have
this.
said that,
Hmm.
but now I realize that it's not about me. I've got these kids. We've got this house. We've got so much great things that this is just something that we just has come about, and we need to figure out how to address it and
Yeah.
heal it so that we can move forward. Those are my
Hmm.
people. If people come and I can feel that all they want to do is just fight about it and they want to torture each other
Right.
about it for the next 10 years, I'm like, just get divorced.
Right, right. You have to
Stop.
both want it, really. You have to both
Yeah.
really want it. And what I realize, at least at this age that I'm at, is that people do people make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Married people make mistakes. And if you want your relationship, the only person that you should listen to is yourself. Really.
Yeah.
Like, what do
Yeah.
you want?
Yeah.
What would you like to see for your life? Because other people, they aren't in your marriage. So,
Exactly. Yeah. And they only hear your side of the story. They never know what's going on the other side, right?
hmm.
We're always so self-righteous. Like,
Right.
I'm the angel, I'm the victim in all this. It's like, and then, you hear the other side of it and you're like, actually,
Hmm.
you've got some stuff to get, real about too,
Yeah.
you know? But, yeah, I just think that it doesn't have to be the only option. And to add on top of this, now with social media,
Hmm.
now finding a text
Right.
to someone else is now called cheating.
Right. Right. Right.
It's no longer just, hey, let's meet up and let's go rent a room and go and have sex or whatever. Now it's
Right.
like, I found my partner messaged a girl.
Hmm.
And then the guy's like, well, I just thought it was fun. Like, she's not paying attention to me. So I just thought, I'd send
Right.
a picture or
Right.
whatever, say this thing. And now
Flirt. It's just
it's
flirting or
flirting.
yeah.
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 Or yeah, whatever their justification is. But the other person's like extremely hurt by that. And
Hmm.
now they're actually considering destroying the entire if you want to call it, empire that they've built. But more importantly, and this is the point that I'm really, really concerned about, is the impact on our children.
Right. Right.
And what are we teaching our kids when we behave this way, when we hold such disrespect and anger towards the person who we say we love the most? And then what are we telling our children about our partner? So now, let's say, I'm a woman and my husband's done me wrong. Now I'm going to start talking crap about my husband. And now
Right.
they have this severed relationship with their dad where they think their dad is
Jerk.
a loser, a jerk, when
Mm-hmm.
really it was just like there was a breakdown in the relationship. It didn't work. This happened, this happened. But it doesn't mean he's a bad person, doesn't mean he's a bad dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're just creating so much unnecessary damage in our relationships. And I'm really scared that we're creating a generation where people are no longer thinking as marriage as a thing that's like beautiful and something
Mm-hmm.
to look forward to. And even children, and people are like, I don't want to have children,
Yeah.
they're too hard, they're this. And then if I get divorced, now I got to take care of them by myself and be a single mom, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And now we're going to just be in this world where no one values loyalty or devotion or commitment, and we're all just kind of just sleeping around and having babies with whomever,
Right.
wherever. And I just think I'm just very scared for what that means for our
Mm-hmm.
children and what we're teaching them.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to what you said at the beginning of our conversation is that it's about you and yourself. Like, how do you see yourself? Are you aware of yourself? Do you have that self-love? Because ultimately, to get to the level of I want to say like take the blinders off, right? To be able to see marriage the way that you see it and experience it requires a lot. Like you said, it requires a lot of work, right? It requires a lot of work and compassion. And, I hate to say this, but, here in the United States, I feel like, compassion is something that we lack. Like it is not something, compassion, empathy, um, is lacking, and it's all about self, right? It's not about community. So not to get off
Yeah.
on a tangent
Yeah.
here, but I do think
I
it,
agree.
yeah, there takes a level of awareness,
Yeah.
self-awareness, and that you have to see marriage like you see it. I like when I
Yeah.
look, even me talking to you, I'm like, wow, it sounds so beautiful. It sounds so beautiful over there where Jeanell is.
Oh, I do. We do the work. I'm not saying we don't do the work. We do the work
Yeah, the
every
work is
single
hard.
day.
Hmm.
You know what? It's not even hard. It's not even hard.
Oh,
It's
go
just
ahead.
it's just
What?
intentional.
Hmm.
So like every day,
Okay.
hug and kiss. Every day we hold each other for at least 5 seconds. Every day we say, I love you. And
Hmm.
it's always from a genuine place. We never take each other for granted. Respect is number one. We have a no blame policy.
Hmm.
So even if I do something stupid, he never gets angry or accuses me or judges me. It's like, again, all about compassion. And I think one of the things that I see that we do as a behavior pattern and what we've been taught
Right.
as children is
Hmm.
punishment.
Right.
Let's punish people for doing the wrong thing, thinking that punishing them is going to straighten them up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like if we think about our being children, right? Like we were punished so that we would be good boys and girls. But in a marriage, that does not work. So
Yeah.
here we are, in a relationship that isn't working, and we just keep telling this person how insensitive they are and how they're lazy and they don't do this and they don't do this and they don't do this and they do this wrong, thinking that they're going to go, oh, I do that thing wrong, thanks for letting me know, I feel so much better about myself.
Hmm.
No, the other
Hmm.
person's thinking, oh wow, I suck, I'm not good enough, oh wow. Like, so now we
Right.
have, and so what I see as a result, the impact is that, especially around for men, is that they won't do anything. They're
Yeah.
like, I am so afraid to move because everything I've done is never good enough
Hmm.
and I feel worse. So I'm just not going to do anything,
Yeah.
even though
Yeah.
I know I should, but I'm not going to because I know I'm going to get rejected. And so
Hmm.
here we are as women going, why are you not doing that? You know you're supposed to do that. How could you? You're a terrible father, husband, blah, 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 blah. And therefore there that disconnect, that disrespect, that frustration
Hmm.
continues to grow and grow until we don't even see who each other are anymore. All we see are the mistakes, the disappointments, the failures. And then the love just dies from that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's really sad because that's not what's going on. And I think we just need to love each other, and we need to, there's a saying, it's like um mindlessness over what is that called? Maliceness over mindlessness. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
we think that people are out to hurt us, or our partners intentionally trying to hurt us. And no, I don't think we get married to hurt
Yes.
each other. We just
Mm-hmm.
are so consumed in our own little bubble that sometimes we don't see other people or take other people into consideration. And
Yeah.
we just need to get responsible for that. We don't need to have that news hung over our head and punished for the next 15 years of our life for that one mistake that we made,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know?
Interesting. So this has been a really good conversation. Oh my gosh. So many things that you said
So many things.
resonated and makes me feel really good about the potential of marriage. I love when you said that it's not hard, it's intentional, right? Because
Yeah.
some things are not hard, but they can be not annoying, but when you are living a busy life, it's easy to
Yeah.
like rush through things and rush through a marriage and be too tired but you really
Right.
have to be intentional. And it's not
Yeah.
hard to be intentional, right? It's not. It's just
No.
that you have to make time for it because you're intentional
Yeah.
in other ways that you're not even, that you're not even aware of. You're intentional at your work, you're
Exactly.
intentional with kids, you're intentional, with everything outside of yourself and outside of your relationship, but it's just turning that focus and shifting it to,
Exactly.
and taking that, changing that perspective in your head from it's hard to I just need to be more intentional.
Just need to be
So,
intentional. Yeah. Like, and even, sex, for example, my husband is a high sex drive. I'm maybe not as much. And
mhm,
especially being an entrepreneur,
right,
after a 14-hour day, the last thing I feel like is, being sexy.
right,
But even there, I know my husband gives me the signs that, there's
hmm
a want or a request in a
hmm
very subtle way. And so I take the time to finish my day, to take a shower, to go and do some meditation, to do some yoga to open myself up.
hmm
If my monkey mind is going crazy, I actually do some very conscious mindset work. And that mindset work is really grounded in appreciation. Because
right,
if I just think about it as this physical thing we do, like let's just take our clothes
sure,
off and have sex, it's like,
right,
but if I think about it, like, you know what? My husband is amazing and he deserves to be loved and held
hmm
and felt like a man and
hmm
to feel needed by me. And I am going to spend the next hour appreciating this man for who he is because I am so lucky to have someone who loves me so much. And so that shifts my energy from I'm tired, I'm busy, I totally want to go to bed to no, again,
yeah,
intentional. This is my husband who I have been dreaming of my entire life. And here he is in the flesh and blood. And he wants to be with me. Me?
hmm
How lucky am I? That's the kind of mindset I need to get into
yeah. And
in
if
order to
you
be
you have to get in that mindset for an hour, Jeanell. A whole hour. No, I think it's great. I think it's great.
yeah.
So why don't you talk a little bit about your coaching practice? What kind of coaching sessions do you have? What kind of couples are you looking for? Um,
Yeah, for sure. Most of my clients see me for 12 weeks.
mhm,
Um, Traditionally, but if a client is just dealing with one specific problem, maybe it's communication. Maybe it's just like, yeah, we've kind of just we've our relationship feels very roommate
mhm,
status and we
yeah,
just want to shift that. you know 6 weeks is enough. I
mhm,
don't believe in keeping people with me for a long period of time. I want them to get what they need from me,
right,
implement, integrate,
mhm,
tweak, and then go on their merry way and
right,
make room for the next person. I feel like I want to be kind of like the ER, the critical care, the intensive care of relationships. I'm not really interested in the everyday. So how's it going? Like I
Right.
really want to solve the big problems that most people cannot solve on their own, or they go to a therapist and a counselor and they're unable to give them the tools and the techniques and the advice. And I think
Right.
one thing that makes my work really effective is that I don't just speak a bunch of exercises. I'm really talking about like, here's what me and my husband do.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the argument we get into. So one of the conversations we talk about is defense mechanisms. So typically in high stress situations, one person is the talker and the other
Mm-hmm.
person is the runner.
Right.
We've
Right.
got the chaser and the runner.
Mm-hmm.
And so I give this example of, when my husband and I would fight, he would overtalk and I would want to get a timeout and he wouldn't give me the timeout
Mm-hmm.
until the point that I explode and I say something really mean. And then
Mm-hmm.
he gets hurt. And then we're now arguing or upset with each other for the next 4 to 6 hours over something really dumb.
Right.
Right. And so giving them the example of like, here's what we did, here's how we fixed the problem. And now this is what it looks like. They're like, oh, so I'm not just talking theory. I'm like giving like
Practical
on the
advice.
court.
Like here's what you can
Yeah,
take away
on the court
today.
advice.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Mm-hmm.
if they're saying to me, well, we're having communication issues. I go, okay, tell me of a common conversation that you guys would have and just have it right now. And let me just listen to how that goes. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm again not just giving them like you should listen more. You should,
Mm-hmm.
this and this more. It's like no. Here's what you need to do. Stop, stop, stop. Okay, right there. Right there.
Right.
Let's shift things, right? So normally you'd go to the left, now we're going to go to the right. And so I catch them in the moment. We shift that and then
Mm-hmm.
we check in and go, okay, so for the other person, what was that like for you to have your partner actually listen and not interrupt you? Oh my God, that was amazing. I felt
Right.
really heard.
Mm-hmm.
And then I finish with, okay, what would you like to acknowledge your partner for? Honey, I just want to acknowledge you for listening to me and like being patient and just being like in this process with me and being so committed and I love you. And all of a sudden, they start
Right.
feeling good about being together again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like rocket science, but I think it's something that's desperately needed
Yeah.
and and people don't know how to do that on their own. They need
Yeah.
someone to kind of interrupt and go,
Mm-hmm.
stop, stop, stop. Don't do that. Here's what I need you to do instead.
Yeah, I was gonna say unfortunately, there's no manual for how to be married, how to communicate
Yeah.
in a marriage. And
Yeah.
even if you go to premarital counseling, I feel like because we went to premarital counseling, it didn't stop us from needing more counseling in the marriage, right? Because
Yeah.
the other thing that happens is that you grow and you change as individuals. And so, how
Yeah.
does the individual that you are now connect with the individual that your spouse is now. Like it's
Yeah.
not the same, like you're not the same. And so you're going through these changes. So
Absolutely. And then I
yeah.
also have clients who come to me because their partner doesn't want to be in the marriage anymore.
Hmm.
Or they come to me as a couple, but I can tell one person's not as committed as the other.
Yeah. What
And
do you
so
do in those instances?
yeah, it's a little bit of a different technique, but really it's getting to the place where they know that they can only change themselves.
Hmm.
And what I enroll them in the idea is that when they shift their way of being, their energy shifts. And when their energy shifts, their partner and how they relate, how they respond, how they get triggered will shift as well.
Hmm.
And so, usually within 3 to 4 weeks, they'll start telling me this. Like, all of a sudden, my partner's talking to me more. My partner's asking me about my day.
Yeah.
Like, this is kind of weird.
Hmm.
And, or they're saying they just sent me a text that they miss me. Like, what? So to them, they're like totally shocked. But I'm saying, like, hey, this is what it is. You are changing and shifting yourself and not being triggered the way you used to be. So
Hmm.
now they're having to relate to you in a very new way.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times the marriage can be saved with just the one person. And a lot of times the person's like, you know what? When I first got into this conversation with you, I thought I wanted to save my marriage. And now I'm actually okay, like not being in this marriage. Like I'm actually really happy with myself
Hmm.
and whatever my partner's going through in life and they're dealing with their own stuff, that's okay. I know that I love myself enough to know that regardless whether they want to be in this marriage with me or not, that I'm good. And
Right.
I can still
Right.
be a great dad and a great
Mm-hmm.
co-parent,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Which is amazing. I mean, ultimately, whether you're married or divorced and you have to co-parent, what you really want to be able to do is do that, coexist in peace.
Yeah.
Coexist in peace, whether you're married or not. Like, you don't want to be at war with anyone. At least I wouldn't. So,
Yeah.
um,
And so I get these texts from my clients and photos. Like it was a Valentine's Day last week.
mhm,
And one of my clients who came to me because her husband cheated on her.
mhm,
But when we got into the consult, I could tell he was not interested in getting back together with her. She eventually divorced him.
mhm,
And she sent me this, and now they have this amazing friendship. And she sent me this photo of a card and gift cards and a basket. And she's like, look what my daughter gave me. And
mhm.
it was bought by her father.
Right.
And she was like, how sweet is this? And so she's got this amazing partnership with her ex.
Mhm.
Their 6 year old feels loved. And like she truly feels like he actually has her back
Right.
more now that they're divorced than when they were married.
Mhm.
Like
So it
that's
is possible.
extraordinary.
It's
Yeah,
possible.
it
Yes.
totally is possible.
Well, Jeanell, thank you. Thank you for taking us through like what is possible in marriage. This is a great conversation. So it makes me feel good. I'm going to be
Mm.
going to show my husband some appreciation
Yes,
for all that he's
yes.
done. Thank you for coming on the podcast. This was a great conversation. How can people
Welcome.
find you on social media? Where can we find Jeanell?
Yes, I am on Facebook. My website is saveourmarriage.ca.
Mhm.
You can also find me on TikTok and Instagram under at Jeanell Greene. I'm kind of everywhere.
Good. Well, we
But
will we
yeah,
will put that all in the show notes for people to make it easy for them to find.
great.
You've been an amazing guest. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for your time. And for everybody else, I will see you next time.